is the Hollywood Chronicles with Frank McKay. Tune in each week for exclusive interviews with your favorite celebrities.
Frank McKay here. Much more importantly, he's becoming the king of pop culture docuseries, and every one of them are just absolutely fantastic, and I'm addicted to his work. Brian Volk Weiss is our guest once again, and what a tremendous talent this guy is. And now his latest is it's the series finale coming up, Icons Unearthed, Marvel. And the work he's done on pop culture as a whole is it's second to none. Brian, how are you?
I'm good. With that build up, I should probably quit while I'm ahead today.
Yeah, well, listen, don't worry.
I was like, where's my wife? She got to hear this.
Well, hey, listen, we talk about you like that even when you're not on the air. Honestly, you've taken this mantle and you've run with it. And all of these series are just riveting to me. I'm a pop culture guy, but I mean you've just taken this to another level. Give us a little something on what people may have missed. I think it's Tuesday that people will be able to see the finale, but give us a little rundown on what people missed.
So, it's funny when I like Marvel a lot, but I'm not the way I am with Star Wars and Star Trek, which have been with me since I've been about 3 years old. I was a little late to the Marvel party. I only got into it with Iron Man in 2008. So unlike Star Wars or Star Trek, where I kind of didn't have to do that much research when those shows got greenlit, I had to do a lot of research for Marvel. And I do what I call looking or searching for the spinal column. And what that means is when we're doing all this research, I'm always looking for that one story that can become like the spinal column of the entire season. So I'm reading all these Marvel books, I'm watching all these movies, I'm doing all this stuff. And then I finally saw this one sentence in one paragraph in the middle of this like 800-page book. And it was a very simple thing, and I've told this to a few people, and nobody ever is like, oh my God, that's crazy. Like, I always have to walk them through why this is insane. So I feel very lucky. It resonated with me because I almost missed it. But here was the one little nugget that for me broke open all of Marvel. When they were shooting the first Marvel Avengers film, 2 weeks into filming, Thor came out. 3 weeks before they wrapped filming, Captain America came out. So if you're like a lot of people, you're like, yeah, so what? Well, you have to understand, they spent $200 million on the Avengers. Thor and Captain America are 2/5 of the leads. So imagine if they're sitting there 2 weeks into shooting the Avengers and Thor bombed. And the other thing you always have to remember is, statistically speaking, 6 out of 10 Hollywood movies bomb. So there was a 60% chance Thor would bomb and a 60% chance Captain America would bomb, statistically speaking. Then you got to look at those characters. Now, I love Thor, the first one, and I love Captain America. I love them. They're great movies. I would say they're both like A or A minuses. Phenomenal films. But those are very complicated stories, very strange characters. And they had absolutely no idea if either of these movies would work. And yet here they are, sitting there in the middle of New Mexico, spending $200 million, where the lead of the movie, who is ostensibly Captain America, they didn't even know if the movie was going to work or not. So that shows you the tolerance for risk that this company has had since the beginning. And for me, I'm like, all right, I get these people. They're cowboys. That's who they are, and that's what we tried to show this season.
Hey, where is Stan Lee, as far as the late great Stan Lee? Where is he on par historically? Do you have a comp to Stan Lee? Do you have somebody that you can compare him to in other aspects? Because Stan Lee and Marvel kind of go hand in hand, right? But who is he the equivalent to, say, 100 years ago or 200 years ago?
Oh, it's funny. I didn't realize you were going to go backwards. I was going forwards. The only person I can think of, and I'm going forwards, and I apologize because I cannot think of anybody going backwards. I mean, the only person who's even close would be George Lucas, and then I would argue Tyler Perry. I mean, if you look at the sheer amount of characters created and the money that has been generated, the George Lucas and Tyler Perry are the only two people I can think of.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I guess you're right to go forward, but I mean, even if you go back in literature, I mean, it's not like who's it? Burroughs, who created Tarzan, created a whole bunch of people. You know what I mean? It's like he's known for that,
exactly. Yeah. Like the people like him are known for one thing, and like all you have to do is look at Marvel's comp, which of course is DC. There's no Stan Lee of DC.
No.
There's a bunch of Stan Lees. So, I mean, by the way, I realize what I just said could be controversial to certain people.
We know what you meant. You're not. There's no Stan Lee, right? There's no one.
But there's no comp. I mean, the people that made Superman had absolutely nothing to do with the people that made Batman, who had absolutely nothing to do with the people that made Wonder Woman. Like at Marvel, I mean, Stan Lee is connected to or outright created out of his own brain some of the most iconic characters in human history, first of all. Second of all, and this is the other thing that always cracks me up that everybody forgets about Stan Lee, like, he was also an executive. Like, this was the guy dealing with, like, time-off requests. This was like the guy who had to like give raises or demote people or like deal with cash flow. So like here's a guy who's like literally created some of the most iconic characters in human history, and he's like, he's got to deal with like payroll taxes, making sure the copy machine is getting looked after. Like that's the other thing about him, which I feel often gets forgotten. I mean, he was an executive leader as much as he was a creative leader, which. That's why I'm saying, I other than George Lucas and Tyler Perry, who were both creative people and business people, I can't think of anybody else.
Yeah, listen, just to switch gears for a moment, I've got to hand it to you. I've never watched a Fast and Furious movie before I saw your docuseries, and I can only compare that in my life to something else. Stacy Peralta, who did a great job with, I think it was called Dogtown and the Z-Boys. It was a skating,
great
skateboarding.
Great
doc. And I'm not a skateboarder. I had no interest in skateboarding.
Same.
When I watched that, I was just blown away by it. I mean, I was emotional about it. It was just amazing. And you did the same thing with Fast and Furious for me. So congrats to you. I mean, what you're doing, you're separating yourself from the herd, and just congrats to you. Congrats on this. Let us know anything else we should know about the Marvel, Icons Unearthed Marvel, and anything else that we should know about you that's coming up. And then before you go, of course, give us your social media site and website and everything where we could follow along with what you're doing.
Well, we got a lot of shows coming. We are the busiest we have ever been by an exponential variable. Just to sound mathematically brilliant, even though I failed algebra 3 times. But yeah, we got a lot of shows coming. Don't worry about us not making shows. So. And as usual, I can barely talk about any of them. But we have a lot of announcements there are shows we've been working on for a year and a half that haven't even been announced. So we got a lot of stuff coming. Season finale of Icons Unearthed Marvel is this coming Tuesday. I always got to try and remember to say that. And I'm on Instagram under my own name. Technically, I'm on Facebook, but I don't use Facebook as much. But yeah, Brian Volk Weiss on Instagram.
Congrats to you. Another wonderful piece. I can't wait till Tuesday to see the last of it. Thanks for being here, and congrats on everything.
Thank you. as always. I appreciate being asked back.
Brian Volk Weiss, everyone. He's become the absolute master of the docuseries on pop cultures, phenomenons. And, by the way, I've had him on, I don't know how many times I've had Brian on, but he is, he's an amazing guy. He's a Star Wars guy, and, that's his world. He's obsessed with Star Wars since he's a little kid. And he got into that heavily. He got into, the idea of Star Wars and just talking about it and making the film about it. Fast and Furious, I've never watched one in my life until, and by the way, they're entertaining, right? But until I saw his docuseries on Fast and Furious. But he is to pop culture what, I don't know, like I mentioned Stacy Peralta, who did a brilliant job on Dogtown and Z-Boys. That was something it blew the movie blew me away. The documentary blew me away. Sean Penn was the narrator. I didn't even know that as I was watching it. He did a great job on it. But the way they laid it out, Stacy Peralta, just so you know, and we've got to get him on one of these days, but he was one of these Z-Boys. And and again, I haven't seen it in so long. I'm due to watch it again, but it absolutely blew me away. And I have nothing to do with skateboarding whatsoever. My kids weren't heavily into skateboards. Some of them, they all owned skateboards, but they weren't heavily into skateboards. They weren't into the history of it. But this is the history of skateboarding, and in America, the real history of it. And they talk about this one group of kids that were surfers, and they were kind of poor kids, but they lived near the beach, and they all were obsessed with this certain kind of surfboard, and they hung out at the surf shop. They were surfers. So when they started getting into skateboards, and especially when the surfboard manufacturer that they loved started making skateboards, they started using techniques that you would use in surfing and in skateboarding. So he brought this group of kids that Tony Alva was one of them, Jay Adams was one of them, Stacy Peralta. He had real long blonde hair at the time, and he actually did I think he did a Charlie's Angels. This was back in the 70s when this group were formed. But the guy from the surf shop and skate shop ended up grabbing these kids, and they all ended up being iconic in skateboarding, and they all had this different style, like they would touch the ground, and that's kind of a technique, I guess, surfers, I don't know anything about surfing either, so forgive me, but they would put their hand out, and there was a surfer who would kind of do that. It was a stylistic point that these guys all used, but they used it in skateboarding, and they showed the contrast. Peralta, the filmmaker, showed the contrast where everybody was just kind of standing up straight and, like straight as an arrow on, and I'm sure it was skewed, a great deal. But this was their competition, and they're just, seeing how long they could, skate for, or how fast they can do. These other guys were just completely, untethered. They just went out there and they performed. They were creative. They did things that nobody else did, and they just blew the whole, place away. And I don't even know if they ended up winning first place, but they captured the attention of the nation. And again, I'm talking about Dogtown and Z-Boys and the Z-Boys, and they just went into all of these different aspects of it. And again, I want to get Stacy Peralta. He's he was a skateboard champion, and he was, he was also the filmmaker for this documentary. And, I brought it up to Brian Volk Weiss, who we just had, if you're tuning in a little late here, Brian Volk Weiss, we were just talking about his Icons Unearthed Marvel. And he's big into pop culture. Peralta, all I know of him from is really this movie, and then they made it into a live action thing, a drama, and it was, it was good. That was good, but nothing like the documentary. The documentary absolutely blew me away, and it has to do with pop culture. And anytime one of these filmmakers, one of these showrunners, puts pop culture into a historic perspective, you've got to respect it, because it's here. It's so powerful. Gaming, for example, is so powerful. People are going to look back on it years. It's not the Frisbee. We're not talking about. Well, and by the way, the Frisbee, back in the 50s, and it still, existed, today, whatever. I get it, but that was a fad. The hula hoop was a fad. But in general, things that started out to be something, but got adopted by society or a segment of society, and someone coming along to take it to another level, all of a sudden it's past that. The skateboard, we're talking about this documentary that started in, or that focused on the 70s. Kids are still skateboarding, and Tony Hawk became a legend. All these different folks. It's in the Olympics now, and without this one group, being there, certainly it's probably not going to be an Olympic sport. And I think personally, without Stacy Peralta's great documentary, Dogtown and Z-Boys, there's no way that's an Olympic event. Snowboarding and there's just no way that it exists. Extreme sports isn't existing without what Stacy Peralta did. Tony Hawk for sure. I mean, he brought it to another level. But the reason I'm talking about this is Brian Volk Weiss is just doing that with pop culture. He's creating these docuseries, and this one is, what is he with? He's usually with Netflix, and I assume he is as well. He's an Emmy-nominated film producer, founder, CEO of the Nacelle Company and Comedy Dynamics. But he is, where is this? Finale airs April, on Vice TV. He's on Vice TV here. But he's on Netflix quite a bit, and you could see all of his stuff streaming. And he's as good as they get. But listen, why not? I remember growing up, video games were there. We had to stand up, obviously, to play our video games. It wasn't until Nintendo put out their first, real system that there was anything close to what we were seeing in the stores, in the game rooms, at home. And my brother brought home a Nintendo once. It's the NES, the original, and that blew us away. We were like, what? Even the game that came with it was Mario Brothers, and that was such a departure from Atari. Atari were stickmen. We were playing Atari baseball, which was, you were playing with stickmen and enjoying it, or you were playing Space Invaders on there or whatever. It was Nintendo that broke through. What the kids are doing now, not even kids, what gamers are doing now is they're changing the world, certainly the world of pop culture tremendously, but the gaming situation, and I haven't played on a video system I played with the kids, 15 years ago. So, when they were kids, I played with it. I haven't gotten into, any of the gaming, but the gaming situation is here, and it's real. And I know people, I've relatives that say to their kids, "Why don't you throw those things out the window?" And I don't know why. And I don't know why they would say that. I could see people getting addicted to it, and it's a bad thing. But pop culture is here, and and it's part of mainstream. I remember when Game Boys came out, they started giving them to surgeons all over the place. Surgeons, and the surgeons had a perspective on it. Frank McKay signing off. Brian Volk Weiss has been our very special guest. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Hollywood Chronicles with Frank McKay. Tune in next week for more celebrity interviews with your favorite Hollywood stars.